the next speaker. Again, another colleague of us, Abhinav Agarwal ji, who is the curator and chief curator of our INDICA books platform. He himself is an author and he leads a group, a center, which makes people read books and discuss books, review books. Shri Abhinav Agarwal ji lives in Bangalore with his wife and 2 children. He holds a bachelor's degree in computer engineering from Mumbai University and is a gold medalist from the Indian Institute of Management, Bangalore. He is the author of Completing Vyasa's Mahābhārata, 16 Upakathas for the Modern Reader, a retelling of the 16 Upakhyanas from the critical edition. He is also the author of fiction thriller Predators and Prey. In 2018, he edited, self-published his daughter's book, A Year with the Mahāpuranas. He is the technical editor of an Oracle Press McGraw-Hill book. He is also the curator of INDICA books. Abhinavji, if you have brought your book Completing Vyasa's Mahābhārata, 16 Upakathas for a Modern Reader, can you please display that book here? This is a very recent achievement of Sri Abhinavji. Let us just see the cover and...
Namaskar, Nagarji. Thank you so much. This is the book, and I think I'll have to unblur my background. So this is the book Completing Vyasa's Mahābhārata, 67 Upakathas for the modern reader. So thank you so much. This book owes its existence. It's coming out to a lot of different people. I have mentioned, and I'll repeat it again. Thanks to Hariji's, his stupendous efforts, basically, in everything, and all that is part of the INDICA family of groups and initiatives, and INDICA books that I am associated with is just one small part of it. But also Professors Vishwa Adluri and Joydeep Bakshi's incredible work on the Mahābhārata, including their edited compilation that they brought out of the late Mahābhārata scholar Alf Beitel. The book owes itself to a lot, and obviously, of course, the critical edition and Sri Vivek Debroy's unabridged translation that I've relied on heavily for this book.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I think you also mentioned their article on Upakathas. Yes, Professor Vishwa Adluri and Joydeep Bakshi's article on Upakathas also as an inspiration for you. And such an erudite scholar, his daughter also published on Mahāpuranas. That shows what a family he is upbringing. And he himself participated in this Upakatha publication. So you definitely must be expecting such an in-depth understanding of Itihasas and Puranas from his talk. Thank you very much, Abhinavji, for coming. And please, over to you.
Thank you, Nagarji. Okay. First of all, thank you, INDICA, for inviting me to this symposium. Hearing some of the other speakers before me and the ones to follow, given their range of knowledge and insights that they have into our texts, the Vedas, the Upanishads, the Itihasas and the Puranas, I don't feel qualified to talk on these topics. But one of the things that I like doing is telling stories, and the Mahābhārata is definitely, it's a Panchaveda, it's a Puran, it's Itihasa, it's a Dharma Shastra, it's a Niti Shastra, it's all of those things, but it is also, I believe it to be the greatest story ever written. It is a story like no story was written and is likely to be written. And within that story, there are so many lessons, there's so many learnings to be had. that I thought that I will take one of those threads and just talk a little bit about them, which is the subtlety of dharma. So dharma is sukshma. Dharma as a word, I'm not going to get into that or its definition as etymology, but dharma means many different things. It can mean morality, it can mean ethics, it can mean law, religion, custom, rights, and much more. It refers to the god Dharma himself, or his son, or his mortal son on earth, Yudhishthir, as Dharmaraj. But dharma is what bears. It has no equivalent word in English, though it is sometimes loosely, inarticulately, so to say, translated as duty, obligation, even religion, but none of which quite capture the essence or the subtlety or the variations of the word. Dharma indeed is subtle. So as I said, I'm not going to talk about the definition of dharma or that, but I still want to use the Mahabharata to illustrate some examples. And one of the hopes is that if people like this, that they will be encouraged to go and read the unabridged Mahabharata, perhaps in its original form, but if not the original form in Sanskrit, then at least a translation. As I said, my primary reference has been in as far as English goes, Sri Vivek Dabroy's unabridged translation of the critical edition, and I've also referenced and referred to the Gita Press edition, the Gita Press translation in Hindi. So when talking about Yudhishthir, let us, use his life and some examples, some episodes from his life to talk about the subtleties of dharma. So, as far as dharma is subtle, this particular line, this particular phrase occurs many, many times in the Mahabharata. It is uttered many times by Yudhishthir, by Bhishma, by Krishna, by Dhritarashtra, by Karna. Interestingly enough, this line is used by none other than Shishupal. In the Arg Abhiharan Parv, Shishupal talks about the subtleties of dharma in chapter 34, and to no less a person than Yudhishthir. But it is not to educate him, it is not to enlighten him, it is not to have a discussion with him. Rather, Shishupal is questioning Bhishma's choice of Krishna to receive the first offering and Yudhishthir's acceptance of it. This is something that does not go down well with the Shishupal at all. And we know how that ended. So one question that arises is, what should the Yudhishthir have done between this argument that was principally between Bhishma and Shishupal? And we know how it ended. Krishna ended up killing Shishupal. What was Yudhishthir's dharma at that point? And this is not a question in isolation, because Shishupal's death led to a chain of events that I would say were one of the principal causal factors in the game of dice that followed. And the game of dice, as we know, and the events that followed ended up leading the Mahabharata and the characters inevitably on a path of, so to say, no return that ended in Kurukshetra. And why is that? Because Shishupal's death led to Shalva attacking Dwarka. Shalva's attack on Dwarka necessitated Krishna's hasty return to Dwarka to defend the city and the kingdom, which meant that when the Pandavas got the invitation to the game of dice that was delivered by none other than Vidur on Dhritarashtra's instructions, and who was the Dhritarashtra goaded by? By the Chandal Chokri, as we know, of Shakuni, Duryodhan, Dushasan, and Karna. There was no one that the Pandavas could turn to for advice, and certainly not Krishna that they could turn to for advice. So it goes back to the question, what was the dharma, or what should have been the dharma of Yudhishthira at that time? But let us now spend a little time on the game of dice itself. And by the way, after the game of dice has ended, Dhritarashtra tells Vidur that no one knows about the subtleties of dharma better than you, which is kind of interesting, because in the game of dice there were only two people who spoke out very, very vocally, very strongly, unequivocally against what was happening in that sabha. Vidur was one, Vikarn was the other. And we'll come to Vikarn in just a little bit. But the eldest Kuru member who was present there was Bhishma. And Draupadi, in the Dyut Parva, in that assembly of elders when where she is brought, she says that the ways of dharma are subtle. She recognizes that. In chapter 60 of the of the Sabha Parv, she says that the ways of dharma are subtle, and only the skilled can discern this. And she poses a question when Pratikami, the messenger, the usher, is sent by Duryodhan to fetch Draupadi to the assembly once she has been lost in that game of dice by Yudhishthir. She poses this very immortal, timeless question to Pratikami to go and ask Yudhishthir whether he had lost himself first or her. That question, by the way, is left unanswered. So much we may talk about dharma and its subtleties, that question is left unanswered. Bhishma tries to answer it, but in chapter 61, Bhishma tries to answer it, and he says that the ways of dharma are subtle. And he cannot answer the question. He says that he knows that the Yudhishthira will never commit a transgression of dharma. So he, in a way, turns this question back to Yudhishthira. And Duryodhana also poses this question to Yudhishthira. He asks him that Yudhishthira has to answer the question, and if he does, Duryodhana says that Yudhishthira will be shown and proven to the world as a liar. Why? Because if Yudhishthira had not lost himself, then how could he stake Draupadi? How could he even think of staking his wife if he still had something to lose or to stake? But if he had lost himself, then at that point, basically, he had no right, so to say, to stake Draupadi. And Bhishma refers to this a little bit by saying that no, wives do belong to husbands and so on. But this question is left unanswered because Yudhishthira stays silent. He refuses to answer the question. He just doesn't say anything. So, coming back to the subtleties of dharma, Bhishma says that Yudhishthira knows everything about the subtlety of dharma, but it is Vyasa who also tells the Pandavas much later, when the war has ended, that there is no one who knows more about the subtlety of dharma than Bhishma. So the question that arises is that between these two Kshatriyas, Bhishma and Yudhishthira, who knew everything about the subtlety of dharma, they could not answer, they could not resolve this question that Draupadi had posed. So leaving that aside, let us now move a little bit forward that when the 12-year exile has ended and the 13th year of Agyatvaas has also ended, Dhritarashtra sends a messenger to the Pandavas to basically, argue for peace. And he basically says, do not incite do anything, do everything, say anything and everything, but do not incite the Pandavas for war. Actually, even before that, when the Pandavas have lost the first game of dice and they are headed back to Indraprastha, he has granted them, Dhritarashtra has granted them back their kingdom and everything. He sends them back, he sends the Pandavas back and says, go, but he also requests Yudhishthira that do consider the subtleties of dharma. The implied message there is that Dhritarashtra is requesting Yudhishthira not to resort to hostilities as retaliation to everything shameful that has transpired in the assembly. What was the dharma at that point, we don't really know, because even before the Pandavas had reached Indraprastha, a messenger from Hastinapur goes and requests them to come back for a second game of dice, which Yudhishthira agrees to, and they end up losing. So Yudhishthira would not utter a lie, right? We know he does, or a partial lie, depending on how you look at it. But lying per se is not considered a sin or a dharma. If you look at the Yayati Upakhyana, Sharmishta tells the Yayati that it is not a sin to commit a falsehood in five cases. What are those five cases? If you're joking, sure, you can lie. To women, and we'll not get into that part, at the time of marriage, which is very, very interesting in its own right, when confronting death and when all of one's wealth is likely to be lost. So, always saying the truth, always lying, dharma is more subtle than that. In fact, there's one line I think where Bhishma says, or maybe Krishna, I keep forgetting, that a person who is always established in truth is but a child as in a person whose intelligence is not fully mature. And speaking about lies or falsehoods, on the other hand, you might say that, or as Sharmishta says, and this occurs elsewhere also, that uttering a falsehood is not considered a sin. But this is sort of contradicted when Narad comes to meet Yudhishthir and the Pandavas at Indraprastha after they have established their kingdom that has been formed by the division of the Kuru kingdom. Narad comes to meet them and he asks Yudhishthir that are you staying away from the 14 royal vices? And falsehood is one of those sins or one of those vices, which, by the way, is actually also what Rama asks Bharat in the Ramayana. When Bharat goes to meet Rama, Lakshmana, and Sita Mata, who have been banished for 14 years, when he goes to meet them, they have they all embrace and they're happy to see each other. But then Rama also asks Bharat and this is in chapter 94 of the Ayodhya Kand, that these are falsehood is one of the 14 royal vices that you should shun. So there is no black and white. Context determines pap and punya, virtue and sin. The dharma varies by yug, by age, by varn, by kul, by jati, by desh. Dharma is subtle. And you lose a lot, I think, in my opinion, if you read abridged retellings. Because at that point, it is not the Mahābhārata you're reading someone's opinion of the text. And especially when this is done by people with ulterior motives, with agendas, with less than perfect knowledge, this is what happens. So coming back to the Mahābhārata, so now the Pandavas have lost everything. They have entered the forest. The 12-year period has begun. The 13th year is going to be spent in Agyatwas. The Pandavas cannot reconcile themselves to what has happened. That they have not committed adharma. They have done everything that is recommended for them. They have been good. And yet, something like this has happened to them. So, the Pandavas basically tell Yudhishthira that, we should retaliate. We should not take this lying down. In times of distress, apadkal, it is perfectly okay to treat 13 years as 13 months or 13 weeks, and then we can, go and take our kingdom back. Yudhishthira refuses. He refuses, and other than the Pandavas, there's also Draupadi who comes and talks repeatedly. She comes and has a long discussion and I would almost say a debate with Yudhishthira. So she tells him something, and among her words, she says something that would later on to go become the motto of a very famous government department, a government agency. Now, I would request you not to Google it. I'll tell you what, but only a part of that shloka becomes the motto of this government agency. It reminds me of another part of a shloka that has become the motto of the Supreme Court of India, which is Yato Dharmastato Jaya, where there is dharma, there is victory. But even this shloka has different variations to it. One of them is, which occurs a few times in the Mahabharata, is Yato Krishna Tato Dharma, Yato Dharmas Tato Jaya, right? Where there is Krishna, there is Dharma. Where there is Dharma, there is victory. It is another quite a fascinating topic, and I don't think we're going to get into that just yet, or in this symposium, in this online talk, whether the motto of the Supreme Court itself needs a little bit of elaboration or a little bit of modification to truly represent what's there in the Mahabharata, but we'll not get into that. So anyway, Draupadi tells us something to Yudhishthira, right? That, oh, by the way, Yudhishthira refers to Duryodhana as Suyodhan. Now, what I just said about reading, it's important to read the Mahabharata in the original, is that so many narratives are built on either a partial reading or a deliberate misrepresentation or distortion of the epic. And the agenda peddled is that the Pandavas used to call Duryodhan, the eldest Kaurav, as Duryodhan, and Dhritarashtra used to call him as Suyodhan. And then when the Mahabharata was written, it was written in such a way so as to cast Duryodhan as in a negative light, unfairly so. This is a trope. This is an agenda. And peddlers of this trope are relying 100% on the ignorance of their readers, which is unfortunate. It is, however, for the writers, it is profitable, it is lucrative, it is adharma. No subtlety there, but I digress. Draupadi tells Yudhishthira, she starts off by telling him about the subtleties of forgiveness and revenge. And in there, she repeats what Prahlad had told Bali. And Prahlad had educated Bali on the two things of forgiveness and revenge. And Prahlad had told Bali that neither was always forgiving good, nor was always taking revenge good. And he had said, which is what Draupadi is now telling Yudhishthira, is that the person who always forgives loses respect in the eyes of his friends, his family, his relatives, even his servants, and his wife. But on the other hand, if you have a person who's always on the lookout for revenge, always wreaking revenge on the slightest of slights, that person is shunned by one and all. And the example, the simile used is much like a snake in the house. In other words, Draupadi is telling Yudhishthira there is subtlety even in revenge and forgiveness, but this was a case, a condition, a fit condition for wanting to take revenge immediately, was Draupadi's counsel. So in the next chapter, chapter 30 of the Aranyak Parv, the one Parv, Yudhishthira responds by talking about the virtues of forgiveness, kshama. And he goes on and saying that forgiveness is dharma, forgiveness is sacrifices, forgiveness is the Vedas, forgiveness is the Brahman, forgiveness is the truth, and so on. In other words, Yudhishthira was not going to act or do anything to take revenge against the Kauravas immediately before the 13-year period was over. Now, we know the reasons why Yudhishthira doesn't want to do that, because when goaded further, he shares his innermost thoughts. He says that the 4 parts of the Dhanurved are today established in Bhishma, Drona, Krip, and Ashwathama. In chapter 38, he tells Arjun this. And he also says that, yes, Bhishma and Drona and Krip, they're all great souls, they're all Mahatmas, but when it comes to choosing, they will choose based on Artha. And he says in chapter 37, he responds to Bhim in the Aranyak Parv that though, and I'm quoting, though the conduct of Bhishma, the mighty arm Drona, and the great soul Kripa is equal, they will certainly be driven by the royal morsels. They will go where they will side with that team or that kingdom who is paying them. And in case you wonder that, no, this is just Yudhishthira's thoughts, this really cannot be, go forward in time to when the Kurukshetra war is about to begin and the armies have assembled on both sides, and Yudhishthira walks up to the warriors on the Kuru side and takes their permission and blessings to fight the war. And Bhishma and Kripa and Drona basically tell Yudhishthira a variation of the same thing. Bhishma in particular tells Yudhishthira that a man is the servant of wealth, but wealth is never anyone's servant. And he says, I'm tied to the Kauravas because of wealth. The Kauravas have robbed me through wealth, and these are Bhishma's words. So Yudhishthira was very clear why he did not want to act and take revenge, because he knew the Pandavas at that point did not have any allies. Yudhishthira also says that I'm not going to take any action in extreme anger or when emotions are running high. He does do something on the 17th day of the wall that basically illustrates this very nicely. But now coming back, Draupadi tells Yudhishthira that the dharma, when protected, protects. Dharmo rakshati rakshitah. This is the first part of the shloka, dharmo rakshati rakshitah. The second line has something that is very, very emblematic and representative of the yin-yang of the Mahābhārata, so to say. So which agency has these words as a motto? If in case you have not Googled and you don't know, these words are the motto of the Research and Analysis Wing, RAW, India's external intelligence agency. So Draupadi tells Yudhishthira that the wise and the noble have said that dharma, when protected, protects, but she says in the next line, I don't think it protects you. Because she says for a person who always followed dharma to be so overcome by defeat, loss, and humiliation was a travesty. If the follower of dharma was not protected, then strength is all that mattered in this world. So Yudhishthira replies with words that sort of echo what Sri Krishna would go on and tell Arjun in the Bhagavad Gita, that Yudhishthira replies that he follows dharma not for the fruits of dharma, but that is the proper way to live. That is what the texts have said, and that is what his elders used to practice. So on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, this is what basically Krishna is also telling Arjun in the Bhagavad Gita, the second canto, 47th shloka. Karmanye vadhika raste ma phaleshu kadachana ma karma phal hetur bhur mate sangostava karmani. That you have the right to action, but not to the fruits of those actions. So what happens then? Yudhishthira says that we need weapons, we need divine weapons, and Arjun is the one who has to go and get those weapons, and Arjun leaves on a multi-year voyage to get those weapons, and he does end up getting the Pashupatastra from Shiv. Now, let's fast forward to the Kurukshetra war. Let's go to the 15th day first. After Bhishma fell, Drona became the commander-in-chief of the Kaurav army, and things sort of took a more brutal, more intense turn as far as the fighting was concerned. Abhimanyu was killed on the 13th day. 7 Maharathis, warriors, ganged up against one, and Abhimanyu was killed. A defenseless, unarmed Abhimanyu was killed on the instructions of Drona, who told them how to unarm and disarm Abhimanyu, how to destroy his chariot, how to kill his charioteer, how to sever the string of his bow. And even there is a Yudhishthira who has a role to play, and what should have been the dharma of that time, because when the Agyatvas was, when the 12th year of the Pandavas' exile was ending, Jayadratha goes and he spots Draupadi alone in the forest, and he abducts her. Bhim and Arjun go after Jayadratha, defeat him, capture him, rescue Draupadi, bring Jayadratha back in front of Yudhishthira, who spares his life. It is the same Jayadratha then who prays for a boon that he gets from Lord Shiva, that yes, you will be able to hold off the Pandavas in one battle on one day, but without Arjun. On the 13th day, that is what happens. Jayadratha is at the mouth of the Chakravyuh that the Pandavas are unable to penetrate, leaving Abhimanyu alone inside the view. And who sends Abhimanyu into the view? When Arjun has been called away to fight the warriors away, far away from the battlefield, from where the main battle is happening, it is Yudhishthir who urges Abhimanyu to go into the Chakravyuh. So the question that is, what is the right dharma at that point? Because what happens after that, after Abhimanyu is killed so unfairly? Arjun takes a vow that he is going to kill Jayadratha before sunset the next day, which he does. And so infuriated is Duryodhan by this turn of events that he orders Drona into continuing the battle into the night. And what happens at night? The Rakshasas are much stronger, as is Ghatotkacha. Ghatotkacha had been fighting even earlier in the war, but never at night, and Rakshasas are much stronger at night. So to prevent his entire army from being annihilated by the Rakshasas and Ghatotkacha, Duryodhan makes Karna use his Shakti weapon against Ghatotkacha, killing Ghatotkacha in the process. But Arjun is now safe. So again, the question is, what should have been the right dharma? Cause and effect is not simply linear in this case. Let's move forward to the 17th day. A couple of days later, Karna has now become the commander-in-chief of the Kaurav army after Drona fell on the 15th day. And this is the decisive day of the battle when Yudhishthir knows that Karna and Arjun are going to come face to face, and only one of them is going to live. Yudhishthir has a short skirmish with Karna, and he has to retreat, and he goes back to his tent and he waits news for Karna's death, because he knows when Arjun enters his tent, he is going to enter with news of Karna's death. But Arjun doesn't see Yudhishthir on the battlefield. He starts to worry, and despite Krishna assuring him, Arjun insists on seeing Yudhishthir before he will go back to the battlefield and battle Karna. So when Arjun enters the tent, Yudhishthir assumes that Karna is dead, and he congratulates and he exults, and Arjun tells him, no, brother, Karna is still alive, but don't worry. Now that I've seen you, I'm going to go back to the battlefield and I will kill Karna. And Yudhishthir loses his temper. Yudhishthir loses his temper and he says some very nasty things and words to Arjun. He says, I did not know that you were a coward. I did not know that you had so much of love for Suryodhan. Nor did I know that you feared Karna so much. Chapter 48 of the Karna Parv, this is what Yudhishthir tells Arjun, and then he says two more things that I think prove to be the tipping point for Arjun. He says that it would have been better if you had never been born, if you had been aborted in the 5th month itself. And the Gandhi doesn't do you any show. It's for show. It is not good. Just throw it away. And at that point, Arjun his hand goes to his sword and he starts to unsheath it. And Krishna is standing there looking at this entire spectacle. And he asks Arjun that I do not see anyone here who should be killed. So why are you, drawing your sword out? And Arjun replies that I had taken a promise that if anyone asked me to abandon or throw down my Gandhi, I would kill him. And this brother of mine has said exactly that. So now I am honor bound, duty bound to kill him. And of course, Arjun does not kill Yudhishthir, which is another illustration of the subtlety of dharma, but we'll not get into that just yet. Now, finally, the war has ended. Duryodhana has taken refuge in a lake. He is spotted and found out by the Pandavas, and he's challenged to a fight. And Duryodhana says that I don't want to fight. You know what? I'll just go become an ascetic. I'll renounce everything, and you can have the kingdom. The same Yudhishthir who had said that forgiveness, Kshama is Dharma, Kshama is Vedas, Kshama is Brahman, Kshama is truth. He tells Duryodhan that, fine, you want to give away the kingdom to me, but no, I'm not going to take it from you. It is not yours to give. And then he says those words that I have always found very chilling. It is the same Dharmaraj Yudhishthir who tells Duryodhan that if between the two of us, both of us remain alive, people everywhere will be uncertain about who emerged victorious. Yudhishthir is telling Duryodhan this is a fight to the finish. For one of us to be called the victor, one of us has to die. Dharma is not always black or white. It is very, very subtle. So what is dharma? What is our dharma? What is our dharma as a citizen, as a son, as a daughter, as a husband, as a wife, as a father, as a mother, as a student, as a teacher? Somewhere in the tapestry of infinite variations in hues lies our dharma. And the Mahābhārata is perhaps the greatest text ever written to provide us with answers if we are willing to look and read and look and read between the lines. It can serve as a guide. Provided we read and learn, provided we read the Mahābhārata, provided we do not read someone's opinion, interpretation, misrepresentation of the Mahābhārata. And the truth is out there. And we don't possess the 1,000 eyes that the Indra does, but at least we can try. And I have come to the conclusion of my talk. If I have a couple of minutes, I can end with how Krishna diffuses the tension. If not, then we can leave that for some other time.
Please do. Yeah, maybe I think you're going to be brief, so.
Oh, okay. So here is Arjun saying that I've taken a vow, I've taken a promise that if anyone asks me to abandon or drop my Gandiv, then I will kill that person. And now a promise is a promise, and I have to kill Yudhishthira, I have to behead him. And once tempers subside, here is Arjun saying that, no, but I don't want to kill my brother. But Krishna says, well, a promise is a promise. You have to kill your brother. You have to behead Yudhishthira. And Arjun says, how can I do that? How can you, O Keshav, ask me to do that? And Krishna says, well, okay, dharma is subtle. There is more than one way to follow dharma. How do you kill your elders? In essence, Arjun is saying, I want to kill my elder Yudhishthira. Krishna is saying, how do you behead? How do you destroy? How do you kill your elder? Physically is one way, but the other way that you kill your elders is by disrespecting them. Disrespecting your elders is as good as killing them, which is an incredible insight. It is so obvious to us, but the import of it in this context is so subtle. So what does Arjun do? He goes and he insults Yudhishthira. He calls him a gambler. He calls him a person who's weak. He lets loose a volley of insults at him. All done? No, because now Arjun is again racked by guilt. And Krishna asks him, what happened now? Arjun says, I've insulted my elder. I cannot live with this. I have to kill myself. And Krishna says, okay, here we go again. So Arjun says, okay, Keshav, what do I do? And Krishna says, how can you kill yourself? He says, no, praise yourself. Because it's one thing if others praise you, but self-praise is as good as killing yourself. Obviously, Krishna had not heard of LinkedIn and social media, but leaving that aside, it is a dharma for a different yuga. Arjun goes and praises himself that I am the greatest, I am the best, I am the most handsome, I am this and that. Done. Krishna says, okay, you've killed your brother. Are you happy? Arjun says, yes. Have you killed yourself as Prayashchit? Arjun says, yes. Now can we return to the battlefield? Arjun says, yes. And they go back to the battlefield and we know what happens. Dharma truly is subtle, infinite variations. And I thank you, INDICA, and I thank you, Nagaraj-ji, Hari-ji, everyone for this wonderful opportunity. Discussions on the Mahābhārata can go on for hours and hours, and especially in the company of such learned and wise people. So thank you for this opportunity, and thank you, everyone. Namaskar.
Thank you very much, Abhinav-ji. Actually, you have given us a great opportunity. That was such an enlightening, erudite, and as you rightly worded, it's subtle. The subtleties are so minute, and they need such a discerning analysis, and it was really so meticulous analysis that you did. And the final conclusion that you brought also was so subtle and so profound that actually it needs to be circulated in the social media very widely. Thank you very much.